The UK government says it's taking a tough stance on illegal migration with record high deportations and workplace raids. It's released videos of people being arrested and escorted onto planes in handcuffs. But is this an attempt from the new Labour government to win favour with right-leaning voters? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, nearly 19,000 people with no legal right to stay in the UK have been removed since the Labour Party won the election last July. The crackdown is being seen as an attempt to fend off Nigel Farage's Reform UK party, which is growing in popularity. But will it help to stop the influx of people arriving in the UK on small boats?
People with no right to stay in the UK led onto planes as they are deported. Immigration enforcement officers raid people's homes and places of work. Nail salons, takeaway restaurants and car washes are all targeted. It's footage the UK government has released for the first time of foreign criminals and failed asylum seekers being arrested and some removed. A sign that they are taking a tough stance on immigration. Over 600 people were arrested in January alone, a 73% spike from last year. Since Labour took office in July, more than 19,000 people who had no right to be in the UK were deported.
The purpose of this bill is to strengthen UK border security, which has been weakened and undermined in recent years, to restore order to the immigration and asylum systems that were left in chaos, and to bring in new counter-terror style powers for our law enforcement.
A response to the growing influence of Nigel Farage's Reform UK party, its anti-immigration sentiment has garnered support as more and more migrants enter the UK, many making the dangerous journey from France across the Channel in inflatable dinghies. The number of small boats arriving on UK shores has risen hugely in the past 6 years. From 299 in 2018 to nearly 37,000 in 2024. But the immigration debate is not just in the UK. Countries such as Germany, France and Sweden are grappling to overcome the issue, with its politics shifting to the right. Italy has attempted to send migrants to Albania for processing. And in an alternative approach, Spain is set to legalize some undocumented migrants to tackle labor shortages. But as the number of migrants arriving in the UK continue, will Labour's initiatives deter the arrival of boats and reassure voters?
Well, let's bring in our guests. In Nairobi, in Kenya, we have Peter Herbert. He is a former immigration judge. In Tenerife, in the Canary Islands, Lina Vosyliute. She's a senior associate researcher at Brussels School of Governance. And here with me in the studio, I'm delighted to have Nigel Nelson. He's former political editor of the Sunday Mirror. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Nigel, I'll come to you first. People get deported from the UK every week. How much of what we're seeing is for show?
Quite a bit of it. And what the Labour government are worried about is the way that reform, which is based its entire policy platform on being tough on immigration, is rising in the polls. So they're roughly about 23-24% in the polls at the moment. If that was repeated a general election, they would be looking at somewhere in the region of up to 100 MPs. So Labour are really concerned about that. As a result, that they not only want to get tough on immigration, but to be seen to be getting tough on immigration. And hence, that's the reason why we saw a few days ago a load of footage of illegal workers being loaded onto planes in handcuffs to be sent back to their home countries. I felt quite uncomfortable with that because it felt like it came straight out of Donald Trump's playbook. But Labour want to show they're doing something about it. So they're deporting more people. They've got rid of 19,000 people since they took power back in July. More to come, obviously, but it's trying to show that they really are an anti-immigration party. It is principally because of reform.
Peter, that phrase we've just heard there from Nigel, straight out of the Trump playbook. Do you have concerns about this?
Absolutely. I think he's absolutely right that, Farage is the lowest sort of form of, I suppose, xenophobia that you can get in existence in the Western world. And for the British government to, especially Labour, to emulate that is really disgraceful. People are deported in handcuffs all the time. They are done so in handcuffs only if they're a security risk. But generally speaking, people, the vast majority of people, go voluntarily. And so if you have a rush to the bottom, you fail to address the fact that migration has benefited the United Kingdom enormously. It still does. And the consequences of people being removed is only a tiny proportion of those who are legally here. And one of the common problems is that repeated governments, Labour and Conservative, have demonised migrants. And if you demonise migrants, then eventually you give the oxygen of legitimacy to people like the Reform Party. Otherwise, they would not have it.
Lina, is this something we're seeing then across much of Europe? Populist leaders, populist politicians, and migrants being vilified in many countries for everything that is deemed to have gone wrong there?
Unfortunately, this is a trend, and this is an outcome of short-termistic policies, because governments tend to be elected for 4-year, 5-year cycles, same at the European Union level. And we lack the coherent, systemic and long-term view on how the societies will look not only 5 years from now, but 10 years, 50 years, and so on. So demographic statistics should be quite awakening. We see that already the trend of work age people dependency and the number of pensioners are rapidly increasing. At the moment, this ratio of working age population versus pensioners sits as approximately 33%. And it's looking like it will accelerate very quickly, and by 2100 we'll have 60% of people over 65 years old. So basically, we really need to take into account these demographic shifts and how it will affect the welfare system and how to make the system sustainable, because it's so easy to the right-wing parties to make the population to believe that for everything they can blame migrants, but at the same time to potentially undercut the future income or future contributors to this pension system. In fast forward in 10 or 20 years old. And I think once the question will become about whether one will get the pension paid or whether one will live in society just among their own nationals, the narratives will start to shift.
Thanks, Lina. Nigel, there was a feeling in Westminster around Christmas, a couple of months ago, the communication could be a lot better in number 10 Downing Street. What we're seeing now with these kind of videos being pushed out to the media of people being deported in handcuffs, all, rapidly feeding into the news cycle, is this part of better communication, for want of a better phrase?
I think number 10 would argue that, yes. I mean, certainly communications were bad. There was a feeling that when Labour took over back in July, they hadn't put the preparation into government that everyone had expected they would. And one of the areas particularly was the communications that were coming out. So it's become clear for government that communications weren't good enough. They're now certainly trying to improve them. I'm not sure the reason for that was the politicians weren't listening to the communicators. I know most of the people there who run the comms side in Downing Street, and they're very good. So I'm a bit surprised that communications were so bad. But yes, the short answer is that now the idea is let's get the information out there, let's make it clear, let's make our policies clear. I do think that when it came down to that footage of people being deported, that really was about playing to the gallery. That wasn't really about proper communications.
I was just about to ask my next question to Peter. Peter, who do you think this was aimed at? Was it aimed at a domestic UK public or people wanting to come here, you know, predominantly on the small boats, the dinghies from northern France? Was this a message to them to say, you know, come to Britain illegally and this is what we'll do to you?
I mean, with all due respect to number 10, people who are seeking asylum in France or Germany and seeking to cross Europe, the last thing they're going to watch is Sky News or the BBC. They're not interested. And the people who really aren't interested are the people traffickers. Nobody coming from across Europe or from North Africa or the Middle East who's escaped poverty or war or destitution sits behind a TV screen, bites their nails and says, I'm sorry, I'm not coming to the UK because I've seen a few people with handcuffs. They have seen far worse suffering on their journeys. It is aimed at a domestic audience, and the domestic audience is one which has already had winter fuel payments denied, bad communications, appalling decision. It has had scandals about ministers and expense accounts, absolute crass stupidity, nothing about migrants. And therefore, the problems that this government has is one that Nigel has said about a poor preparation for the reins of government. And the easy scapegoat, as ever, are migrants who, in a sense, are at the receiving end of persecution and poverty all around the world. And one final point. The government announced some £80 million to donate, I believe, to sub-Saharan Africa to help alleviate poverty. That's a drop in the ocean. You know, the National Lottery Fund stopped funding £100 million a year for the African continent, I believe, outside of the UK in 2019, and has done nothing since to reintroduce that. So these are the things to remember. Most people do not want to leave Ireland or the United Kingdom or Albania or Tunisia or Nigeria. They would prefer to stay and be prosperous in the homes in which they've grown up, in which their families are. They leave because of climate change, persecution and poverty. Those are the things that have to be addressed by this and other Western governments as a matter of urgency.
Lina, you're in the Canary Islands. The Spanish have taken a very different view on this, haven't they? So Spain is moving this year to make life much easier, giving documentation and status to about 300,000 currently illegal migrants in Spain. And I guess this is going to help the Spanish economy.
Indeed, the Spanish move is very much welcomed, and it certainly will have a very good basis or will create opportunities for people to regularize their situation, to know what they can do and what they cannot do, not to be abused by various criminal organizations, and basically just to really start rebuilding their lives without having this fear of being one day found out and deported. So this is certainly important in terms of Spain getting tax payments from these people, and as I mentioned, also these money going to the pension system, welfare system, and supporting the rest of the Spanish population.
Thanks, Lina. I want to bring Nigel back in. Nigel, just tell me, why doesn't Keir Starmer look at the Spanish model then and start giving people documentation and allowing them to work and getting them contributing to British society and the economy from week one?
Well, two problems with that. The first issue is they do. If you have a migrant who has not had an asylum claim sorted out for a year, they can then go and work in a shortage occupation. One of the things they're trying to do is speed up the backlog to try and get rid of this. The second thing, and I think this is more important, the idea of giving them that sort of thing from day one would also give them a stake in the country. What you couldn't do is if you decided their asylum claim fails, it'd be very difficult then to send them away if they've already started paying taxes and started properly living here rather than being stuck in a hotel.
Peter, just to you on that, do you think it's something that Britain will ever look at, you know, giving people the right to work from week one and just welcoming people and maybe just not having this kind of toxicity around the phrase migrants and asylum seekers? Because that's the narrative in the media here, isn't it?
Well, it is, and Britain's got a very short history because the forefathers and mothers of those very same migrants came to save the United Kingdom in 2 world wars. So, and without their labour in the 50s and 60s, Windrush generation, Britain would not have survived now. And one of the immediate things, I think, which has to be recognised, leaving aside that historical issue, which is often forgotten, is that there's an issue of world dependency. You have people here who have a skill set, who are maybe doctors, nurses, teachers, agronomists, people who have a skill in their countries of origin, and therefore let them work, reduce the bill to British taxpayers. And there is nothing actually finite. Just because you work for 12 months awaiting a claim does not mean to say that you can't be deported if that claim is not successful. So it is a balancing act, but it's a balance which Britain gets wrong. And one final point. A very good measure which was thrown out with Brexit and that tragedy that has befallen Britain since 2016, we were allowed to remove those people who across the EU had applied for asylum and were in the process of being decided when they came to the United Kingdom, and remove them back to the country, safe third country where they'd first landed and claimed asylum, such as Italy or Spain or Portugal or Germany. Scrapping that has meant you play directly in the hands of trafficking gangs. The Dubs Amendment, which proposed that unaccompanied minors be given access to come to the United Kingdom to join families, equally has been left aside by successive governments. And finally, let people claim asylum in Schengen countries, have their asylum claims assessed in situ, and you will do a lot to undermine those that seek to risk their lives in small boats, which represent about 1% of the total in any event. So there are many things the Labour government to do to rectify the situation, short of the xenophobic Trump-style fascism, which seems to be the agenda for the Reform Party.
Lina, we live in a very uncertain world. We're seeing more conflict. We're seeing climate change impacting on people's lives all over the world. I mean, Europe needs to realise that people are just going to keep coming. So perhaps the Spanish model might be something for others to genuinely look at.
Definitely, and the narratives around migration as such would need to change, and I think they will start to change once the demographic realities will be unavoidable. We see in this demographic graph, if you see the baby boomer generation is now reaching the pension age. So once so many citizens who are active voters will reach the pension age and will really start asking what about their rights and their future income. I think we will have to have these hard and honest conversations on how the society needs to look, and to have like viable strategy for each EU member state, but also for EU as such, not only for 5 years next commission, but for 20, 30, 50 years forward. So I think the long-term strategic and systemic thinking is what we actually are now the most missing within the EU policies. And once we would start to apply this long-term lens, we would have completely different narratives and conversations.
Thanks, Lina. Nigel, just back to Keir Starmer's situation, what he's been doing the last week or so with regard to deportations, is that enough to fend off Nigel Farage for the next 4 years?
No, probably not, because the only way that you'll be able to do that is if you can stop people crossing the channel. And as the previous Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, said, there is no silver bullet to go and do that. So these various things will help. It'll help to use anti-terror laws to combat the smuggling gangs. What it won't do is put a stop to it. So that is the key. I mean, the figures at the moment are that on Keir Starmer's watch, 25 migrants have already crossed the channel. That compares to 37 thousand for
Thousands,
the,
yeah.
thousand. Sorry, yes, that compared to 37,000 for the entire previous year. So nothing that's going on at the moment seems to be actually halting that. I think that Peter had a number of very good points there. I think one of the issues is the politics of it. A lot of people aren't affected by migrants, but think they are. So they think that they won't be able to get a house. They think that they won't be able to see a doctor. They're worried about schools being overcrowded.
Is that not the case?
It happens in certain areas. And one of the obvious problems is migrants tend to settle where other migrants from their own country are. So you then get pockets of it. If we could distribute through with the entire country, that would be much better. It's what we did when the Syrians came over, when we had a proper migrant scheme for Syrians, that they were dispersed right across Britain.
Peter, one thing that's kind of always struck me as strange about the whole crossings of the Channel, why doesn't the UK have an asylum centre, a building somewhere in the Calais region of France, where people can go and lodge their asylum claim there? I mean, surely better cooperation with the French might sort of resolve this and stop people drowning in the Channel as well.
Well, it really is Britain shot itself in the foot when it left the EU. And it really, Starmer should have the courage to go back and renegotiate with the EU to have people return to the safe third country where they've claimed asylum. The small boats issue was not an issue before 2016. It became an issue because of the manic consequences of Brexit and taking back our borders, quite the reverse. So I do agree that, and Nigel made some good points, that yes, asylum seekers in France, in the EU, where people can be processed in situ, would go a long way to preventing this. It wouldn't completely eradicate it, but it would substantially reduce it.
Lina, you're in Tenerife in the Canary Islands. How do the Spanish authorities and people feel about these new routes that are opening up? People coming from Western Africa into the European Union via tiny little islands like El Hierro in the Canaries.
Actually, we had opportunity with our research to go and to speak with some authorities, and surprisingly, local authorities are very much down to earth. Small island El Hierro is also witnessing aging population, and people with whom we spoke were actually saying that we would like even those some of those refugees and asylum seekers to stay within the island. For instance, back in the day, there used to be some foster care system to kind of adopt unaccompanied minors, which is no longer present. However, there are, of course, concerns of small island being by large overcrowded. There are not enough trained officials, trained staff to take care of that many people. And these people, just like in Greece situation, in the islands like Lesbos, Kos, Samos, are being kind of left out of sight, out of mind from the people in Madrid or in Brussels. So basically, local populations are trying to grapple. Now there is this new proposal of trying to redistribute the numbers of incoming asylum seekers and other migrants from those Canary Islands across the Spain. Let's see how this is going to roll out. But I really believe, and it's still kind of promising that in Spain there is a little bit more openness, and especially among people in general, when being more welcoming and trying to accommodate the needs of refugees and other migrants. Although there are some serious issues, because we see that new deals have been stricken with the countries like Senegal, Morocco, and so on. And now migratory routes are shifting to go more via Mauritania. And we see very rapidly increasing the numbers of deaths. And this is, again, the Coast Guard's cooperation and working together with those authorities in order to pull back refugees and migrants trying to depart those countries. There is a particular issue about people coming from Maghreb region who are basically seen as ineligible asylum claimants, so they even do not get often to even submit their claims and are immediately returned.
Thanks, Lina. Nigel, final point to you. Do you think Keir Starmer will be still talking about this in 4 years' time when there is the next UK election? Is migration going away anytime soon?
No, it's not. Yes, I think he will. Whether or not reform will still exist in 4 years' time is an interesting point. And as far as Nigel Farage's idea that he will be the next Prime Minister, I think any small party, it takes them 10 years to get the people and the policies in place to do that.
But do you think this whole migration debate is something that Farage has absolutely latched onto as an Achilles heel for Labour?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll talk about it again. Nigel, thank you. And to Peter and Lina as well, superb contributions, all of you, thank you. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.